Okay. Arlene Matthews, how you doing?
I'm very good, thank you. Thank you for having me.
How's it going? I got to ask you this before we start, though, because I know you're a Geordie. But I know you have a few affiliations to different football clubs. But are you a Newcastle United girl at heart?
I'm absolutely Newcastle United. Absolutely, Toon Army. There is Toon Army in my house. Everything's black and white. Well, actually, you can even see in the top that I'm wearing is black and white.
Black and white.
It has to be. We don't have red and white in my house. My children are Sheffield Wednesday fans, though.
Yes, of course.
Which is fine. But also they don't like red and white either because of Sheffield United. So we just don't have that in our house. It's a definite black and white household.
Good to stick to your team. I know we don't have much to shout about, but it's good that you.
No, we have nothing to shout about whatsoever. Just pride, just pride of the city.
Well, Alan Shearer played for us. That's about as far as it goes.
And at one point, we were like 14 points clear at the top of the Premiership, and then ruined it. And that's pretty much we bottled it. That's pretty much the height of. I mean, that was my childhood growing up in Newcastle. It was all football. It was.
Yeah, Keegan. I love it if we beat them. Love it.
Oh, I love it. Oh, it's my favourite. My favourite time in football. All that.
Oh, of course, yeah. So 2020 been a weird year. How's it been for you?
It has been an extremely weird year, hasn't it? Do you know what I was talking about with my friend this week? And in fact, I think I did a post about it on Instagram. But a friend and I were talking, and we were saying, in almost hushed tones, to be honest, that this year hasn't been that bad in many ways, which sounds ludicrous when the absolute chaos is around us. But I've learned so much how to zone into your own space and deal with the bits in front of you and not overwhelm yourself with the bigger picture. And in fairness, the friend I was talking to has also gone through a lot of trauma in her life. So we were both like, this year ain't that bad, is it really? Like, it's all right, isn't it? And so I appreciate like your listeners may well not feel the same, but ultimately we can only base it on our own experience. My own experiences of this year is I miss people. I miss being around people and my family and the people that I love. My world, my work is online. So I was in a good position anyway. So actually this year for me has been far busier, bearing in mind my work is in self-development. It's been far busier than it probably was even last year. It just means I haven't been out the house. But it's been a year where I've found that I've gained a whole new audience of people who never knew that they needed to work on their self-development until a global plague hit. And then when a global plague happens, you realize that you might have some anxieties underneath that were, maybe not showing themselves because you were quite distracted beforehand. And so actually I found that we've been largely pretty good. I mean, I've got my two daughters, my girls, Brooke, who's 9, and Texas, who's 7. And it's been challenging for them. And homeschooling is just not the one at all. I'm not a fan of the homeschooling and the constant need to get snacks for everybody, like throughout the day, always, just 24/7. And for my daughters, they've had some anxieties around, just the fact that they have had experience of death and loss means that people talking about death and loss in their space, not that I would, but other people will, they'll overhear somebody talking about the death count or something lovely like that. And so for my kids, it's actually that's frightening for them, and that they then worry that I will die and that something will happen to people that they love. So there's definitely been a lot of anxieties, but we've managed it. How have you been?
Yeah, it's been okay, but the thing is, I think you've got to avoid certain things. Like if you watch the news for 45 minutes, yes. you're gonna be depressed when after you've watched it, because you have 15 minutes coronavirus, then a thing called Brexit. Or just let you know how Brexit's doing 5 minutes later, and then you have Donald Trump saying, "What now?" Okay, well there we go, and then you have all this the divide with the Black Lives Matter movement. There's all that sort of protesting and stuff going on. You watch the news for 45 minutes, and you're like, the world's shit. Like, what's going on?
100%. Like, there's the one thing I say to anyone that I work with and anyone that I love and care about. You've got to be ruthless with what you let into your space. You've got to. And the news, it's unnecessary. I'm going to put it out there. I've never been a person I'm not an ignorant person. I know what's going on in the world. I read history books, and I'm interested in our, political background and what's going on in the world. I am interested, but equally I still have to know what I want to let into my space at any given time. And actually for me, I've realized that things like the news, I don't need to see that. I'm still going to get information from my friends who watch the news and from negative Sue on the school run, who's going to want to give me some kind of information about what's going on in the world. Someone that will tell me, and I've educated my people around me enough for them to recognize that I create a bubble for myself, my bubble of safety, that, I protect my space to a ruthless amount. I don't need to watch the news. They will tell me, oh, Holly, just so you know, we've gone into lockdown. All right, okay. What does this mean? Okay, Holly, we're in tier 2 now. You've got to do it. And I have people that tell me I don't need to sit and watch endless slaver from some politician, Boris Johnson, who, in my own opinion, have zero faith in. I don't need to see that. I don't need to. It's not going to make me feel good. And actually, ultimately, in my day-to-day life, it doesn't affect me in a major way. Me hearing what he has to say is probably much more likely to anger me than anything else.
Yeah.
So
I think we all have a few negative Sues in our lives, don't we? You do get that person that kind of goes, Lawrence, 653 people today. It's peaking again. Second wave. God. And it's just like, well, thanks for that.
Thanks, Sue. Thanks for that, Sue. That's lovely. And there's always those people, and you know what? You have to be careful of those people, and you have to know when you have them. It's not about being horrible about Sue, because Sue's doing the best that she can as well. Mm-hmm. Everybody's doing the best that they can based on what they have in their locker, and so's Sue. But that doesn't mean that you have to be around her all the time, and that doesn't mean that you have to let her negativity into your space, whoever your negative Sue may be. And I think it's important that we remember that we've got to protect our little space so that we don't feel rubbish.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about your business, the Happy Me Project. Have you, with it being such a weird year, have you had quite a lot of people come forward to you, like, help me?
Yes. Yes is the at the beginning. So the Happy Me Project was, started after the death of my husband Ross, as mm-hmm. you well know, and it's always been my biggest thing with self-development is let's make it accessible and not this big deal and not this big scary thing, that we just talk about it in the same way that we would go down the gym, or we just talk about our mental health and how we can make sure that we're looking after ourselves. And I want to make it accessible. So at the beginning of the year, what I found happened was that I did all of the things against everything that I know to be good ways of looking after yourself. And I started to watch the news, and I started to feel a bit rubbish and overwhelmed, and like, oh my God, there's a global pandemic, there's nowhere to hide, and your brain goes and runs amok. And I started to feel that, and I was like, hang on a minute, I feel crap. Like, what am I doing? What am I doing that I haven't done in previous difficult times? Now, my most difficult time, the death of my husband, I can compare it to that and go, well, you got through that and you dealt with that. So what were you doing then to get through that? And what I realized in that time was that what I did during that difficult time was I didn't consume. So I wasn't consuming in the same way at the beginning of this year. When we went into lockdown, I was consuming. I was thinking, I'm a doer, I'm an action taker. So I'm thinking, right, what's the information that I need to get through this pandemic? And I was consuming, and I wasn't creating in the same way. So I thought, right, what I need to do is I need to find ways to give back. That's, the helper high that we get from helping others. So the one thing I can add during this time is I can help other people to work through stuff. I can give them tools and things like that. And so at the beginning of lockdown, I decided that I would go live in my Facebook group every single day, bar weekend. So boundaries wise, have to have weekends off. So every weekday I went live in the group, and we talked about every single type of self-development subject. And I was giving out tools, and we were talking about resilience and meditation and mindfulness, and, what do you do when you're having a rubbish day? And we worked through stuff every day. And what happened with that is that that group wasn't really a very big group, and it was used for people who came to workshops and things like that with me. So it wasn't a very active group. But what I realized doing that during lockdown was that so many people need this stuff. And there's now a really big, I think it's about 2,000 people in that community now who have sent me messages since saying, I couldn't have got through lockdown without that group. I couldn't have not knowing that I could check in at every day, 10 o'clock, and you would be there and we'd be talking about how to deal with stuff, and you would listen. And it's not about me, being, I never ever, when it comes to self-development, I never want to be somebody's crutch. It's not the same as, I'm not someone's mom. I've got my own children, but I want to give people the tools. And what happened was that there was just this, I think everybody really reflected on their lives so much that not only was I seeing people going through, you know, being part of the online, the free community, but I was seeing people do my courses online. I was, you know, I've just recently launched the You Got This Academy, which is a 6-week program. And I did that at the end of the year because I felt like as we went into that new stage after, you know, September and then before our second lockdown, I realized that we kind of had got to the stage now where we're like, this is not going to be a short-term thing. Like we need to all look at our lives and what we want and what we don't want. And so I felt like that was the right time for those that wanted a bit extra and wanted to work with me a bit more, you know, in a smaller group. And so we're doing that at the moment, but I've just found that so many people that never consider self-development have come to me and went, I just thought it was all a bit rubbish, but now I feel rubbish and I don't know what to do about it. Because before there was going down the pub and there was going out with my mates and there was distractions, and now there isn't distractions and I'm in my house and I can't see my people. And now, you know, it was certainly interesting to see the difference between extroverts and introverts as well during this time. I class myself as a confident introvert. So I'm very confident. I'm not shy, but equally I get my energy from being alone. So it was never really a big deal for me in terms of being on my own. However, this length of time, even the introverts are like, I need some people. Like, you know, even I'm feeling it. But I think it was more the extroverts that get their energy from being around their people and being social that really struggled to suddenly not have that interaction. It was like, you know, in the normal world, the extroverts might be the ones that are like out there and like confident, whereas actually the introverts were like, we got this now. We got this stuff. We got the lockdown stuff down. We've got this. We're going to come into our own. So it was interesting seeing how different people dealt with it.
Yeah, for sure. I never classify myself as a hugger, but I'm actually longing to give someone a nice hug. Usually when someone gives you a hug, you're like, oh, this is a bit awkward. I'm not really too sure what to do with myself. Yeah. But no, I really want to sort of give one of my best friends a hug or family member. You know, it's really interesting. It just kind of makes you appreciate those little things.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you're sort of known for being a vlogger, and I've had so many people you know, interested coming on the podcast, and you go, oh, here we go, another vlogger, and all these bloody vloggers that want to come on and talk. But like, you know, I think with you, it's your I'm trying to use the word, your vlogging life is very real. It's very raw. You know, it's like no bullshit. It's not, you know, getting a coffee, #blessed and all that stuff. It's yes, you know. And so, I mean, how did you were obviously, you know, you were vlogging during, you know, the illness of your husband, but you did some vlogging beforehand as well, didn't you?
Yeah, well, I mean, I came from an acting background, so I was always in front of the camera. When I was 11 when I started in TV, and so being in front of a camera has always felt a very safe space for me. And I don't know how, you know, I'm sure a psychologist would have a field day with that, but I grew up normal school, all of that, you know, and then being on set was always my space where I felt like I could be myself, which is ironic when I was acting and I was literally pretending to be somebody else, but it felt like I was in my zone and in my flow, and that always felt like that. So actually, when I got older and, you know, the whole new wave of being in front of, you know, of everyone's famous, everyone's a vlogger, you know, as you say, and, you know, if I talk to my children about being on telly, they're like, so like, everyone's on telly, what do you mean? So I started, I mean, I did bits and pieces of vlogging on YouTube, and I didn't really get it, and it certainly wasn't, you know, this was years ago. And the first thing I did was this was before vlogging, but my YouTube channel became famous, because famous is not the right word, it became a channel, like a viable thing, because I used to do accent videos. So it was actually just for other actors. Yeah, and I just did, like, they were so rubbish, like, but I remember I was doing a Liverpool accent, and like just doing it for a friend, for some, like, who wanted to do that for a play or something, and I didn't know anybody, I didn't really understand what it was, I didn't realize we had channels, I didn't get it, so I just put it out there and not really thinking about it. And then it was a friend of mine who worked for somebody who looked after YouTube channels, and she said, you know, your video's got like 150,000 views on it, and I was like, what do you mean? Why? What has it got 150? And I was like, refreshing it, like, there's a glitch on this. There's something up with that. Something's gone wrong there. And because of that, I think I realized that YouTube was a space to do stuff. And So initially it was very light stuff, but as I developed in my, I guess, my social media life, and I'm a very, it sounds such a rubbish word to use, but authenticity is a really high value of mine.
Mm-hmm.
So being your truest self, even if that is uncomfortable for other people, it's a high value for me. Like I don't want to hide, and I don't want to feel like I'm wearing a mask. And because my work is me, that's an interesting space, because you have to protect yourself as well. So that although I share a lot, I don't really share everything. It just might feel like that. I share a lot of really true stuff. And when my husband was diagnosed with brain cancer, initially, like that was out there in the world, and it was kind of hard not to be. It was in newspapers and stuff. And then when he was going to die, when we actively knew he was dying, I went into this weird space of judgment of myself, and like, but if I share what's going on, it was this initial feeling, if I share what's happening and how I'm feeling, it will be an overshare. We get an overshare. It's too much for people. And then I sat with that thought and that uncomfortable feeling, because there was the one side of me that was going, actually, this would be beneficial for me to talk this out in front of a camera. And that, as I said previously, that's my safe space. That's my space of being able to get out of my head. That was my safe space as a kid, to get out of my head when I was, going through those teenage years. I was there. That was my comfortable space. And so I basically thought, fuck this. I don't care. I'm going to put it out there, because for a few reasons. One, at some point, I'm going to want to remember what the hell happened here, because I am not in the headspace of understanding or remembering none of this. Two, my children will want to understand at some point, and I want to explain to them in a better way, in a more real way. And also, helper and me wanted to share that experience, because I appreciate that when we share our personal stuff and we share stuff that's uncomfortable, our dark, shadowy self that we don't want to share, the shameful side of our life, or the fear, the scared side, the weak side, when we share those vulnerabilities, it gives other people space to do the same. And I just thought, you know what, if I want, I looked online and I looked for people like me talking about the death of their husband at 32. And I was looking for that, and all I saw was misery, and your life is over, and wear a veil, and like everything is sad. And I just thought, if I can't find what I need, then I need to be that. Then I need to be the person doing that, because somebody else needs to see that. And that all sounds maybe that sounds like I'm trying to be too grand about it, but there was lots of things coming into play there, but I just knew that I couldn't pretend that it wasn't happening, because authenticity had to come first. And I just felt, I just need to talk it out, and whoever's uncomfortable with that, then fine. They don't have to look. They don't have to look. Like, that's it.
I was going to say, because you have had to deal with some shitty comments as well from people, and I mean, how do you, when you're going through such a traumatic time like that, how does, I mean, are the comments just, you're so wrapped up in what's going on that it's just irrelevant, or does it get to you, seeing those comments?
I think I didn't see comments when Ross was actively dying, when I was in the hospice and stuff. I didn't really read anything. I really tagged in things, but I didn't really read anything. I think after sort of a year, maybe in the months after Ross's death, there was the odd one that maybe on the wrong day got in, but largely I'm pretty level-headed about that kind of stuff, because I just think, how sad that you would need to comment that. Like, you must have some really bad stuff, because I know my situation's not good. Like, I know that was painful and crap, and most human beings would look at my situation and go, God, that's awful. I hate that she's having to go through that. That's awful. I would hate to go through that. And so if somebody doesn't feel that way, and what they do is go, you're oversharing and it's disgusting, and how can you talk about your husband? But if you can talk about him, then maybe you didn't love him, or boo-hoo, your husband's got brain cancer, is one of the comments I've had. Like, if someone feels like the need to write that, my logical brain goes, then they've got some really big stuff going on, and I worry what's going on for them. My instant reaction to crappy comments is, and anyone can use this when they get them themselves, is, that's interesting, is my first thought. And I just use that as a stopper for my, I guess, animal instinct of like wanting to go at someone and have a row, is to go, that's interesting. I wonder why you've responded in that way. I wonder why what I said triggered you. I've actually got someone on my Instagram at the moment that we're having a back and forth, because I did some hilarious, I will say that was very hilarious TikTok that I did.
I love your
where
TikToks.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, I amuse myself, and no one, I mean, I have a very low following on TikTok, and it's probably because I'm over 30 on TikTok. But I find, so someone's commenting at the moment because I swore in front of my children. I mean, they were part of the TikTok and they found it very funny as well. But this woman's very, very triggered by it, and it's interesting. And I'm not, I mean, we're having a little back and forth, but there's part of me that's like, isn't it funny, like how cross she is about it? And she really is. She's quite cross and she's quite angry, and she's like going back and forward with me. And I'm just like, today I sent her a message, said, "Are you all right?" Because I think in another world we'd probably get on. Like, you seem quite sassy in that. Like, in the real world, you wouldn't speak to me like this. You just wouldn't. And it's just that that online space is an interesting one. But when I was going through everything in, right in the thick of it, I didn't notice it afterwards. There was the odd day that it got through, and I just thought, you, like, do you know what, but I'm not passive, so I will say fuck you to somebody, and I won't feel uncomfortable with it, and I won't care that business wise that might not look great, because I think, do you know what, the reason that people come to me as a coach is because I will tell you, I will love punch you, I will give you no bullshit talk. I'm not going to, there is uncomfortable parts of life, and when it comes to death and loss, there's loads of uncomfortable stuff. There's the fact that I'm watching my husband die, and there's one part of you that's desperately doesn't want them to die. There's one part that's going, I don't want this to be happening. I want to cling on to every breath that is there in their body. And then there's the other part of you that's going, that is no longer my person, and I want you to go now. And that is the most uncomfortable conversation, because no one wants to say that. No one wants to have those conversations about death and about loss and all of those things. That people don't want to imagine that after the death of somebody that you love, that you can find laughter, that you can find love, that you can find happiness. It's too uncomfortable for us. And if someone's not talking about that, and that's why I do, then people feel all this shame in their own space, because they think, well, I had that thought and I did that, and am I wrong? And so this is why I find, social media can be a very positive place in many ways for that. Obviously there's lots of negativity, but again, it goes down to what you're going to allow in your space, your choice, right? I don't have to look at everything on social media. My bubble on social media is really largely pretty lovely. The only time it doesn't, interesting thing on this is that I don't go on Twitter too much. And recently my daughter's been not sleeping very well, so I've been sitting in a room for a long time, and I kept going on Twitter because political stuff was happening, obviously, in America, and it's a bit more newsworthy on Twitter. So I was having a look at, what's the general consensus of opinions. And this is a very prime example of just be careful what you put out onto the internet, because you never know where it's going to go. And I commented, something came up about Russell Brand, and he'd offended people, and it was such a silly thing. And I was reading it, and I can't even remember what it was now. He'd said something, and people thought he was being patronizing about working class people. And I was like, he's working class though. It was a joke. He's a comedian. Like, it's clearly a joke. Whether you like him or not, it was not a serious comment. It was definitely like Russell Brand's slavery, flowery thing. And anyway, he was posting something. And so I commented a couple of things like, get a grip, like stop being so triggered and overly offended, like it was a joke, like have some perspective, there's a blooming plague going on. And I made a few comments, thought nothing of it, and then got a Google alert to say that it would be quoted in like the Daily Mail or something. Holly Matthews, actress, defends Russell Brand. And I was like, it was literally just me late night tweeting like Donald Trump, like, just wildly tweeting. I thought, oh, for God's sake, you never know when you put something out on the internet, people, you've got to be careful. You just don't know what's going to be out there. It's worrying.
Absolutely. I feel like with trolls, though, people that just like give you shit on social media, I don't think you're ever going to find a happy or successful person that does that. Like, there's two reasons they do it. Either one, they've got some kind of mental illness which is serious, and they need appropriate help, or two, they're just quite sad people that just like to bring others down. I mean, you'll never find someone that's like, you know what, I'm really happy with life right now. I'm successful in my job.
Yes.
So you know what I really like to do is I like to go on Holly Matthews' Instagram and give her shit. You
It's
don't
not gonna
find
happen.
no.
Well, one of the guy who had written on my YouTube channel once, "Boo hoo, your husband's got brain cancer. Bring out the tiny violins. You're through to the next round," is what he said to me.
Wow.
And there was loads of them, right? And he sent loads, and I got into a bit of a back and forth. Again, not a wallflower, so I do have, I will be honest about like my feelings. And I was going to him, "Are you okay? Like, do you need me to call somebody? Because that is really a very nasty thing to say. Like, that's not very nice. Like, are you all right?" And we got into this back and forth, and he ended up sending me this whole email. Actually emailed me and told me this big sob story about how he'd had an awful year and how trolling people online had become his way to like get out of his head and just like just a bit of a cathartic pastime for him. And then he also told me he was a policeman in Northern Ireland, and would I be his life coach? I mean, I refused because I'm not that big a person, but I'm not that big. I mean, there's a level. I was like, I don't think I can really impartially coach you here. But it was interesting for me. It was a really interesting lesson that the person that was saying such like heinous things online at me, like you said, it's just a sad man who was going through some stuff. I mean, it's not great. I mean, it's not a great way to pass your time, but hey ho, we've got to. We don't have to accept things from people. You don't have to get into a row with people. You can just go completely the other way and go, "Are you all right?" Like human level, like, "Are you all right?" Because you're being.
It's just like being a bigger person, isn't it? Really, and just not giving them.
Not
giving them the reaction what they want, that is the thing. So sort of rewind a little bit, going back to Ross. So I guess before we go into Ross's story, like how did you and Ross meet?
So we met, so I was obviously an actress at the time, and I, outside of acting, used to do things like promotional type modeling where you give out sweets and you look all like a pretty girl giving out sweets, was essentially it. The type, grid girl type. Yeah. So I used to do all of that kind of stuff because it was dead easy, because you used to just book a couple of days, you get a ton of money and then go back to doing what you did. So it was really flexible. And it just so happened that at the other side of the country, Ross had just got into the same thing. In fact, he got into it because he had someone that he knew had done it, and he went to a meeting and he said he turned up and he looked around for this meeting, this interview to become part of this agency. And he said he looked around and there was all these fit girls everywhere. And he just sat down at the table, and Ross was on the autistic spectrum, so he was very direct. I had Asperger's. And so he sat down at this table to this like interview that he was having and just went, "I don't care what I have to do to be part of this, but I want to work with these girls here. There's lots of fit girls." And he actually said he'd made a decision that he wanted a foreign girlfriend, is what he said initially. So when he met me, he was like, "Well, you're pretty, I mean, you've got a Geordie accent, it's basically foreign. You're basically foreign." So we actually met on a job for Pimm's, the drink, and it was a festival. And I actually had a boyfriend at the time. So all of the drama, and I'd been with him for 6 years, and it was a very ended relationship, a very young and ended relationship. And I met Ross, and it sounds the cheesiest thing in the world, and I was never that person. I had so many boundaries about things like that. And I met Ross, and we instantly clicked and just had very similar values in life. We're very similar in our outlook, even upbringing. His dad was a footballer. So Ross's dad played for Sheffield Wednesday and Villa and lots of big clubs. And so he kind of grew up with eyes on him a little bit. And obviously I grew up on television. And so it was that sort of similar level of where you were from. There was kind of always a platform in a way. So even that in itself there was lots of similarities there. And we met. I went back home. We met on that job, went back home, split up with the boyfriend that I was with of 6 years, who I had a mortgage with and a dog.
Oh, wow.
And got on the mega bus, because I didn't drive, to Coventry, where he was from, to see if it was what I thought it was. And we were together nearly 10 years. And we did used to say, I wonder if people will ever go, because initially everyone was like, out of the frying pan into the fire, what is she doing? What on earth is she doing? But I just knew, we used to say, when do you think other people will realize how important this relationship is? And It just was, we were, from the minute we got together, Ross was an entrepreneur as well. He had properties, he was a landlord and had his own business at the time, that kit site, which was all football team wear stuff. And we just spent our days pottering around together, drinking cups of tea and having a laugh. We used to say, those that play together stay together. And we had a laugh, like we enjoyed each other's company and we were together all the time. And so actually in the time that we had, and I remember Ross saying this in 2016 when he had his second brain surgery, he said, this on paper is not going to look enough. It's not going to seem as important as a 50-year relationship. We see all people that they've been together all that time. It's not going to seem on paper as important when it's 8 or 9 years. That was the time it was then. And I just feel lucky. I feel lucky. And even with everything that happened and Ross dying and all of the hardships when it comes to brain cancer, I'd do it again. You know, people don't get that kind of connection with people. And I'm not saying it's the only connection I'll ever have. I'm not saying that you only get one shot at this in life, by the way. I don't believe that either. But I also, believe that you have these really important relationships, and it doesn't, I don't undermine it because I didn't have a full lifetime with Ross, because Ross was such a significant part of my life. Not only do we have 2 children together, but he impacted my life and still does to this day, impacts my life in many ways, and the lessons that we learned and the love that we had and who he, allowed me to be. And Ross absolutely, in terms of authenticity, taught me even more how, to be authentic, because with him being on the autistic spectrum, he was even more honest than probably most people would be comfortable with. But it taught me to be that, because he used to say all the time, nothing happens. You just say what you think. Nothing happens. Like, it just doesn't. Like, people get offended. That's their choice to be offended. Yeah. That's up to them. And he taught me loads. And so, yeah, so we met on a job for PIMS, which I still enjoy.
That's great. I mean, what was the story about your wedding? Because there's a wonderful photo of you and Ross on your wedding day, and it did make me chuckle. So I don't know the exact story behind it all. So what?
So we got married. So we always, like anything with me and Ross, everything was like, it just happened very organically. So nobody asked each other to marry, and we were just like, well, we'll get married. Like, we just always knew that we would. It wasn't a thing like that we wouldn't. And especially when we had Brooke, my oldest, we were like, well, we'd like to have the same surname, and I wanted that. I like the process of marriage. I think it's a good thing. Whatever people's opinions are on that now, but it feels more secure, and I like the idea of it. But neither of us, I've never been one of those women that's like, I want the white wedding, and it was never. In fact, all my life I always said I'll probably end up in Vegas or Gretna Green. I always said that. And I think that's probably the actor in me likes the story. I love a story. It's perfect to be on this podcast, because I've always said to myself, I want to be old and have loads of great stories and funny anecdotes to tell people, like when you're old, that you did some stuff. And so there's always half of that with me and Ross. And then we did initially sort of think, is there a way to surprise people and just get married? And we just didn't want the fuss. I didn't want all of the, the drama of who sits where and what's our color scheme, and like, just not for me. And I'm not anyone. If that's for you, then do you, right? It's totally cool. But it just wasn't for me. And so we decided, the thing is, we thought you could just go and get married, but obviously you can't. You have to register it before. And then, so we have to register, I think, a month before with the local registry office. And then we spoke to a couple of mates of ours. One was a girl who we work with on promotions. So she was out and about sometimes in a day. And a friend of mine who's become a really close friend, but at the time was just a friend and an acquaintance, a photographer friend. And I thought she might quite, business brain. I was like, it might be quite nice for her to get photographs of an unusual wedding. And then we actually did think, do we get married in traditional stuff? Like, should you, even though you don't tell anybody? And then we decided, no, we're not going to. Now, my mum and dad, backstory, my mum and dad were punks. So when they got married, my mum was wearing a red wedding dress and had red spiky hair. And my dad had a zoot suit and yellow shoes, and like the bridesmaids had purple hair, and like, it was like a punky wedding. And in that time, my mum's grandma was like Irish Catholic. And like, it was in a church, and that was like absolutely, she nearly didn't come because it was abhorrent to her that they were getting married in a red wedding dress. So I grew up, I guess, knowing that you could do things differently. And I was never, my mum and dad did teach me to be, to go against the grain a little bit and to do what you want to do. So what I did, part of Ross's business was like printing t-shirts and stuff. So I got him to print on a t-shirt a red wedding dress, like it was like I was wearing a red wedding dress onto a hoodie, and I stuck a red bow in my hair. And then I wore trainers, Nike high tops, and we just went and Ross had his Dad's Sheffield Wednesday football shirt on, and we went and got married. It was like £100 or something, and I was furious that it was that much. And then we did that, and then we went and had a cup of tea afterwards in the local coffee shop. And then we went back to work in the afternoon. We just went, should we crack on, like just get on with the day? That was it. And we just texted everyone and said we got married. And most people, when they saw it on social media, thought it was an acting job of mine. They were like, is that an acting job? I said, no, I actually got married. And my dad initially wasn't happy. And I said, you cannot bring me up to be like a renegade and go against the grain and then expect me not to do that. And you'll love the story. And what my dad did about 6 months later, he went, right, I'm having a party then. I'm having a party and I'm wearing a tux. I'll wear a top hat and I'm making a speech, and I'll make you down a fucking makeshift aisle if I want to, because it's my wedding, and I will. So about 6 months later, my mum and dad had a party and invited everybody, and we went along to our wedding party, and we all had a piss up and just had a laugh. But there was no pressure, because I was like, it's not a wedding, it's just a party. If you want to come, you come, don't bother. If not, it's cool. But you know what, a few people around me, like my grandma, bless her, was like, you'll regret it if you don't get married properly. And I was like, but I don't regret it, because it's a funny story and I did it how I wanted to do it. You don't regret things that you wanted to do. So yeah, so we got married like that, and we did it in the way that we wanted to. And his dad, I think he texted his dad and said, Dad, I got married. And he was like, oh, sound. Like, he wasn't even bothered. And then he rang his mum and told her, and she went, no, like that. And then she went quiet, and then she went, put Holly on. Did you really? And I was like, we did get married. No one believed us, to be honest. I think they just thought we were just full of it, but that's how it happened. And I'm still pleased that we did it that way. And we also got married on leap year day as well. So we didn't have to celebrate it every year, like every 4 years. Didn't want the fuss.
Yeah, well, that's just amazing that you did it your way. You just, that's the thing. It's what people kind of feel like they have to do it a certain way all the time. Like, if it was me, I'd just love to get married on a beach in the middle of nowhere and just like a couple of people, whatever. So it's just nice that you just, it was like your relationship and you guys just did that together. I think that's really nice.
That was it.
I love that photo of you guys. You have to send it me. I'll have to share it or something.
I will.
It's a really lovely photo for you guys to look at. So when Ross's health got bad, I mean, he was diagnosed, it all seemed to happen quite quickly. In terms of like, he seemed, watching some of your videos, he seemed okay in some of the video. Like, he seemed like he was coping all right. He's just doing his thing, just getting cracking on. And then, I was watching them and sort of reaching out to you, seeing how things were going.
Yeah.
And then it was just like he went, and it just all seemed quite, almost like in a month, I think. Did it really go down quite? Yeah.
So it was like, it was diagnosed in 2014, and we had all, the brain surgeries, the chemo, the radio, and all the stuff. And then it was, and like you say, actually, the tumor was just staying still. And I think we underestimate that. When it's big cancer, don't underestimate when it's staying still and doing nothing. Just don't underestimate that, because we looked at that like, but we want it gone. We want it not to be there, because that's what you think. But sometimes living with cancer means that if it's still, it's good. It's just laying dormant there, not doing anything, and that's a good thing. And so actually for 3.5 years, for about 3 years, we had that. And then so in the 2016, it had started to grow a bit, and they decided to do a second brain surgery. So we did that. And I think we were under the impression that we'd then be given the same grace, in terms of we'd then be given that same amount of time afterwards, that it would take the same amount of time to grow back. And so in 2016, his brother, Matty, and his wife, they decided to move their wedding forward because of that because of Ross's tumor growing, and because they wanted him to be best man. They just decided to move it forward. And at that time, we were still, they basically, the second time that they decided to do brain surgery, they decided then to tick a box to prolong, not to cure. Initially, they had ticked the to cure box, which is always, you kind of want that to happen. So, and then in 2016, they were prolonging, which is a Mingin shift. in your mind, but then you still, you know, we were still thinking, well, okay, you know, we've had this time already, who knows, you know, there's always, we didn't not have hope, we never didn't, and we were very realistic as a couple, but also we were like, you know, there's always got to be, there is always those stories of people that do go through the big odds and they come out the other side, and there is those stories, so why not you, who knows, right? We'll give it a shot. And then his brother put his wedding forward, so this would have been the October. He had his brain surgery in the August. The week before that, we had been told, well, actually weirdly, a weirder edge to this story is that the day we were told that the tumor had started to grow again, and it had grown fast. This was within a few months, so we knew that really was bad news. But weirdly, the day that I was told that, I auditioned for The Voice. And so weird. What a weird thing. They'd got in contact with me and asked me if I would come and audition privately for The Voice, and I couldn't have given a shit any less, quite frankly. But I thought, and Ross, you know, liked me singing this, and I was signed to Sony for a while, and he was like, why don't you just go, be a laugh, see if anything comes of it. And I was like, all right, Sam, whatever, you know, just for an experience. Like, I don't like to say no to things. I thought might be an interesting experience. But the day I had the audition for The Voice was the afternoon after being told that Ross's brain tumor was growing. And I went into that audition and tried one note of singing, and literally nothing came out my voice. I was just like nothing, then just burst into tears, and then sat with them for a bit. I was like, I'm really sorry, this is what's happened. I'm not like a lunatic. But there was just a weird dynamic to that day of auditioning for the producers of The Voice and then being like, this is what the hell am I doing? Anyway, I digress. We then, at the wedding, Ross and I knew that his tumor had grown and nobody else knew. So we were kind of holding this secret in, which was really hard because we didn't want to ruin the wedding, knowing that actually on the other side of this, we were going to go, this is bad. Yeah. And so we were then looking to potentially do a third brain surgery, and they then said they didn't want to do it because it was going to grow. And they tried other chemos and stuff, and then it was the May of that 2017, we had went out to Turks and Caicos in the Caribbean, and we had this amazing holiday. And it's weird because I don't know if there's some underlying feeling sometimes of knowing when something's not going to be great and that something needs to happen and something's important. I cancelled 2 things to do that holiday, which I never do. I'm so not that person. I cancelled a speaking event, and my daughter Brooke had been asked to potentially do some filming for this show. And I said, look, we need to spend time as a family. I don't know why I did that. It was very unusual for me to do that. And we went out to Turks and Caicos to stay with a friend, beautiful, you know, part of the world. And there was a few things on that holiday I just didn't think were right with Ross. And when we came back, I was like, I think you need to go and see the doctor and just see where we're at with stuff. And then the day before his birthday, me and the girls were sat writing 32 reasons why we love Daddy. And as we were writing them down, he started to have a seizure. And from that seizure, Ross went downhill. Like, we didn't, other people for the first few weeks after that seizure could kind of pretend that Ross was still there, but I couldn't, because he was not right. Like, when it comes to brain, it's difficult because you lose somebody before you lose them, and they start to deteriorate, and he was doing weird stuff, and couldn't trust his judgment anymore. And it kind of happened that he went downhill, came out of hospital, and then, you're right, it happened very quickly. It was really pretty much six weeks was probably the overall deterioration. And we were in the hospice for 3 weeks, 2 weeks, I can't remember, but we're in the hospice for that. I think it was 2 weeks, maybe longer, maybe it was a month. I don't know, I've forgotten the timeline. I'll check my videos. We then were in there, for that time, but it did feel like it was really, really quick. And for some people who didn't know the full extent, you know, our story and stuff, a lot of people would say, well, it's good that he's not in pain now. But for me, it was like, but he wasn't in pain. Like, he wasn't a sick person. Like, that's so weird to get your head around, but he didn't look for the symptoms he didn't know the symptoms he was supposed to have. So he didn't have them. Like, that's it. He was just not, he didn't let anybody, and this goes throughout his whole life, he never let anybody tell him their version of how things were going to be. And that's a lesson that I have taken from Ross, and it's a lesson that we can all do more of. Don't let somebody else dictate what your story is going to be. Your story of, let's look at the pandemic as an example. Your story of how 2020 is your version. You decide how that looks. You can tell the story of a dreadful year full of pandemic and loss and grief and tragedy. That story's there for the taking. There you go. It's there. It's an easy story. You can tell the story of a year that, for me, my story of 2020, globally, horrendous stuff's gone on. I'm not discounting that. Personally, I've had some really good stuff happen, some really great stuff work-wise. I've been able to spend time with my children. I've missed my family. I've missed some of my people. I've missed, some other things. But actually, there's been lots of good stuff and lots of growth this year. And I think that was the same when Ross died. It's about what is the story that you tell of that. And because he didn't tell that story of, I've got cancer. He used to say, they tell me I've got cancer. I can't fucking feel it. Like, they tell me I've got it. I can't tell I've got cancer. They might be making it up. I don't know. Like, he didn't feel it every day. I mean, I'm not saying, don't get me wrong, I'm not minimizing the fact when he had chemotherapy, he would vomit, he would get sick sometimes, he would have seizures. It's not like we didn't go through that, but we didn't attach to that story. It was just, Ross had a seizure today, and then we went and had lunch. Like, that's how it was. And I understand that for some people, that's so hard to get their head around. And sometimes when people meet me, they might see me as maybe cold, but I'm not. That's how me and Ross were about stuff. Yeah. I have Ross's voice in my head every day. This week I cried over a kettle, right? So a kettle that Ross was very obsessive because of his autism in terms of what he would buy. So he would spend a lot of time researching stuff, and he bought this kettle, and quite honestly, I've never liked it. It's a weird spout, but it was some brilliant kettle. All the reviews were amazing, whatever. Anyway, this kettle's broken this week, and I've had to buy a new one. And the grief side of my brain was going, that's sad. That's the end of an era. That's something that Ross got that is no longer going to be in this house. That's sad. And so I had a little cry over the kettle. And then the other side of me was like, he would be saying, you are such a dickhead. Like, put the kettle in the bin, get on with it. And so I have that in my head. And so it might sound ruthless to some people, but that's how, I live by my truth. Like, that's it. I live by my truth. And my truth is that I'm not sad most of the time. Yeah. That doesn't mean that it's not painful that Ross has died and that I wish that it hadn't happened. It's just that I don't sit in that space.
Yeah, exactly. And do you think, with grief, I think some people just don't know how to handle grief and just because I think some people probably think it's really horrible what happened to you, and they expect you to be this like grieving widow that that is going through all this, but you know what, you're cracking on with it, and it's not that it's not sad, it's just that grief will always be there, but it's about, for you to cope, you've got to surround yourself with things that are good as well and that make you happy.
Yeah, I think that's it, isn't it? I think that my ethos has always been just fill your life with so much good stuff that the grief doesn't feel as big. Mm-hmm. Fill it with so many good stories, and that's not, the grief will come. You don't have to force the grief. Like, the grief will come when you buy a new kettle and you cry over a kettle. The grief will come when I find Ross's handwriting, or I go to a place that the last time I was there was with Ross, or the milestones in my daughter's lives. The grief will come. I don't have to force that, but equally I don't have to sit in it or court it or look for it. I don't need to do that either. I mean, I think giving people permission when it comes to grief to live their lives, like for me, when we live our lives after the loss of someone that we love, we honor their death by living fully. Like, if I sat on my arse and did nothing and gave up, and you know what, if that's what someone does, and no judgment of them, like if that's what you do, then you to get through it, then that's fine. But equally, I don't think that I would be honoring Ross's lack of life by not living. In fact, I would be, in my version of the world, it would be disrespectful of me not to just go and live and do love and find amazing times for my daughters and all of that. And so that's in my head. And I think we just don't talk about grief, certainly not in the UK. I don't think in the Western world we do. We're very uncomfortable about it. And so we don't know what it looks like, other than that we, sorry, my grandma's trying to call me here. So I don't think we know what grief looks like, because grief is talked about in hushed tones, and we talk about it like, we see it on telly, but it's always sad. It's sad emotions around grief. Like, I remember my daughter, when she went to see a counsellor, one of the things we were talking about in the very first session was how grief is sometimes hidden in anger, and that we can be really, really angry after losing somebody that we love. We can be angry at the world for continuing, how dare it. We can be even angry at the person who died, like, how dare you die, like, how dare Brooke and Texas's dad die, how rude, that wasn't in their plan, what the hell. And you can, but we don't, that's not a very comfortable emotion when it comes to grief. It's not the whole what is it, the stages of grief. You can have those stages of grief in one in breath. It doesn't go in an order. I don't think you get to acceptance. Some days you'll go back to bargaining, is one of the stages of grief, where you're going, has this really happened? And I can remember doing all of that. I remember all of those things that I've done. There was a time when I remember sorting out Ross's socks after he died, and there was a moment where I went, can we not just bring him back? Like, there must be a way. Like, the logical, I'm a science-based person. Like, there was a logical part of me. He was cremated, and I'm like, we must be able to find a way. Like, the problem solver in me is like, there must be a way. Like, that's bargaining. Like, those weird things come up for you when it comes to grief. People do odd stuff when it comes to grief, and I think we have to lack judgment on it, and lack judgment of ourselves on how we deal with it, because it, and I heard somebody speaking at a TED talk. I've forgotten the lady's name now. It's gone out of my head. But she wrote a great book about it called, and you'll be able to Google it, no doubt, but Everybody Died, So I Got a Dog. A really good book. And when she was talking in her TED talk about grief, she was, saying that you can't have grief without love, and you don't have love without grief. And they're so intertwined. When you grieve somebody, it's because at one stage you love that person, and you love them, and
Absolutely,
you miss them.
yeah.
And we have to live in that vulnerable space, because in order, like I said, in order for me, I've had all this pain in the loss of Ross, but I do it again because of the love that we had, and because of the experience of that. And that's a really fucking vulnerable space for us to be in as human beings. But I personally don't think you have the dizzying heights of what life can be unless you live in that space of raw vulnerability, whatever that looks like.
No, absolutely. And just sort of talking about the girls, I mean, how was it for them sort of dealing with that? Because how do you as a mum deal with that whilst losing that, Ross? How do you sort of go through the challenges of that as well?
That's ongoing, and it's been challenging in many ways, because children, obviously, they were very young. They were 6 and 4 when Ross died, and so, which it's mad to think about that now, but that they were so little. But initially, children deal with it very matter of fact. Often they don't really even acknowledge what's happened. Because how can they? It's so not tangible, is it, to a child, death? And so they want explanations. And so I had to have seriously difficult conversations very, very early on. I mean, when Ross was in the hospice, Brooke not only didn't have me there, they didn't have me. Because I was in the hospice, they didn't have Ross, they didn't have me. They were with my sister at home. That's already rubbish and scary. And I remember Brooke ringing me and saying, Mom, I really miss you, but I know that if you come home, that means Dad's died, doesn't it? And I was like, that's so smart for her to work that out. And I had to say, yeah, that is true. And she, and children will ask these questions like that adults won't ask. They will ask me, and we still have these conversations. Even though we've had these conversations lots, we will still have these conversations on repeat. And they will say things like, sometimes at each stage of their life, they'll have obviously thought something new, and their understanding of life becomes more. So new questions come up for them, and they'll, Texas, my youngest, asked not long ago whether she had made Ross have cancer. And I said, why do you think that, darling? No, that's not the case. But why do you think that? And she said, because I think I stood on his foot once, And then she's in her head, she's thinking, oh, maybe maybe I did that, and maybe I hurt him, and that somehow gave him cancer. And so children, you have to have these conversations on loop, but they're also very resilient. And I am confident that my girls will be more empathetic and understanding of others because of all of that they've gone through. And, you know, we have very, very open conversations. They've asked me what he looked like when he died, what his skin color was. They've asked me what that means, like how did his heart stop and what happened and what did he say, and what, like, they will ask me questions that no adult would ever ask you. Like, they will go places that you don't really feel comfortable, but as a parent you have to. And that doesn't mean, you know, I've said to the girls from the beginning, sometimes one of us will cry and have a hard day, sometimes all of us will feel sad, sometimes none of us will, and we have to honor the fact that sometimes someone feels sad. Now, as a parent of grieving children, it can be all right, you know, it comes out at different stages in different ways, and we're certainly dealing with my oldest having a lot of fearful thoughts and a lot of anxiety. Some of that will be grief related, some of that could just be normal life stuff that children go through. And it's kind of sometimes picking through what is to do with what and what you can do about that. And you know, we talk about Ross all of the time, so it's never a grey area. In fact, this week was quite a big week for Brooke, my oldest, because she, at school, they were trying to pick a charity to do something for, and she decided to pick Might and Hospice, which is where Ross died. And she doesn't, over the last year or so, she started to get braver about sharing that her dad has died to people if she needs to, whereas before she would just deny it. She wouldn't talk about it at all. Understandably, it's a horrible conversation for a child to have. And this week they had to come up with a poster or a rap or a song or whatever about their chosen charity, and she did a rap, because she's cool, about and I mean in the loosest sense of the word, by the way. She did a rap about, and there was a line in it where it said, my dad died in Mighton. Like she referenced it. And actually that was a huge big deal for her to be able to share that with the class. Yeah. Because that's massive. Like, that's massive for an adult to have to say those words. And so for a child, it was really big. But we talk about that, and we'll say, you know, I say to her, you know, you'll know better now how to deal with someone when somebody else around you has somebody that dies. You'll be better equipped to know what to say, and you'll know what not to say and what doesn't feel good when someone says it. And, you know, so I just think children are so resilient, and it is an ongoing process. And I know that each stage of their lives, there will be a sadness that their dad's not here, but I just try to always keep the conversation open and always keep it that I will say constantly, you know, your dad wouldn't have liked that, or your dad would like that, or you know who would like that. And we say it a lot. So, and I know for them being so young, their memories will be, a lot of them will be memories that I place within their heads, because their memories will diminish. And that's hard. It's hard for my youngest, because she doesn't remember in the same way. And she's starting to come to that realization as she gets older, that she doesn't have the memories so clearly to her.
Yeah. Is that right? It's good that you got the videos there, hasn't it? So they can, when they're older enough, they can watch back. Yeah.
Yeah, that's one good thing. And I took so many photographs and stuff like that. And, you know, as much as Ross hammered me at the time, I was like, no, because I knew that these were important. And I always knew when Ross was diagnosed that there would be a chance that he wouldn't get through it. So we took lots of videos and lots of photos, and those will be a comfort. And sometimes they're sad, because you don't want to look, and because then you miss the person. But I think there will be something that will be, you know, certainly if anybody's going through that, that's listening, just take photos and say the things that you need to say. Because I don't look back and think I didn't say it. I never. There's nothing that I haven't said to Ross that I should have said. That's a comfortable feeling for me. I'm glad I got the shit out of my head and say to the kids.
Yeah, that's great. And I mean, obviously, you know, we're sort of approaching Christmas now. And, you know, how did you guys deal with your first Christmas without Ross? Because there might be families that have lost, even with the coronavirus, someone might have lost, you know, a loved one recently this year. I mean, how did you guys cope with that first Christmas without Ross?
I think the first Christmas we were with his mum, so we were still at her house, and we were actually doing up the house that I'm in now. Ross and I bought it the year previously, so we would actually still doing that up. So we wanted to be with her, one, because she was also grieving, and we wanted to be together. And, you know, Christmas is a nice distraction. from it, actually. Like, you kind of put, I think it's often the quiet after Christmas that was harder. For me, it was New Year was harder because it meant I was going into a new year that Ross wasn't in. That was weird.
Right, yeah.
That was like, this is a year he's never been in, isn't even been in this year before. He's never been in 2018. That's weird. And so I mean, I think you almost have to prepare yourself. I think the Christmas Day itself you surround yourself by the people that you can surround yourself with. And it's lots of distractions of fun stuff. And certainly if you've got kids, it's all about Father Christmas. There's no, it's not the same. Like, kids don't deal with it in the same way with that. They're just thinking about nice Christmas stuff and they're happy for the distraction. But I think it's just being kind to yourself during that time. And for us as a family, the year after, I think, was it the year after my mum and dad came here, so there was still someone here. And actually last year was the first year that we had alone for Christmas. It was the first year, Christmas morning, shall I say, that we had alone. And it was nice. And we decided that we would do, in this house, we would come up with some new traditions. So that was an important thing, that this was new traditions. This was the new version of what we would do. And I guess that's different for everyone. Ross and I didn't have any serious traditions around Christmas. In fact, Ross didn't enjoy Christmas until he had kids at all. He just didn't really like all the fuss about Christmas. But when we had kids, he started to enjoy it. And but we didn't have really strong traditions. So it was kind of nice. And I sat with the girls and I sat down and I said, right, we're going to create some new Christmas traditions. What do you want them to be? And they came up with one, that we write a story every Christmas Eve. We write a Christmas story together. So we do that. And we take a picture by the Christmas tree so we can see how they've grown each year. So that's what they decided their Christmas traditions would be. But I think that can be nice. It's a sad thing to do something different when your person's not there. But maybe then for some people, they want to do something that honors their person in some way, whatever that is. I'm not religious, so I don't have like a God type thing, but if people want to in some way bring their person into their new tradition, so that every year they have a moment where they think about them or whatever it is. It's so individual, but I actually think that Christmas is quite a nice distraction in a weird way. But I do think, as best you can in pandemic times, surround yourself with people in some way.
Yeah. You know what? I was just going to say, it just reminded me when we were just talking about your kids and stuff. Like, I mean, I could see with Brooke, I could see you and Ross in Brooke, but Texas. I didn't know Ross, but I could see Ross's face totally.
Oh my God!
All in Texas, it's crazy.
Well, that's the thing. Like, you and Brooke's mannerisms, and Texas so like him to look at. She's very like Ross's sister Ashley, and Brooke's got the mannerisms. So when if I'm honest, when she's being sassy and stroppy, I say her dad, and I'm like, oh hell no. It just make me laugh. But it's so weird how so much of your behavior is not just taught, that it's really genetic. It's weird, like, because you sort of think, how can that be? Because she wasn't around to see that way of being, but yet that's in her still. And I tell them that, I always say, like, you're so like your dad when you do that, or your dad like that, or your dad used to do that, or your dad used to like eating that, or whatever. And I think they quite like that. And I think that's the thing you have to remember, if you're a person who's lost their partner and you have children and stuff, that your person lives on in them. And I always remember Brooke saying, when my grandma died, and I asked the girls what they believed about life and death, like, did they believe in an afterlife? Because I don't believe in heaven, but they know that they can. Like, I always say to them, I have no idea whether there's a heaven or not. Who knows? There might be the pearly gates, there might be something completely different. I don't know. Do we live again? It's your life. Nobody knows the answer. And actually, I was very strict before Ross died, and I sent a video out to everybody that I knew, telling them not to put their own opinions on the girls on that, because it infuriates me, quite honestly, when people, and I know they mean well, but when people will say to me, oh, he's looking down on you, and I think, I fucking hope not. Do you know what I mean? Like, as rude. Like, I just think it's so confusing for children. And even if you do believe in God, I'm just going to offer this advice out there. Even if you believe there is an afterlife, which absolutely loads of your listeners will, no doubt about it, and there's nothing wrong with it, and I'm not saying I'm right, you might be completely right, but when you have children, they are so literal. And I've heard this from friends of mine who have also been in similar positions to me. If you say to them that their person is somewhere, then they are going to want to be there. So if you say, if you die, you go to heaven, and your dad's in heaven, they're going to talk about killing themselves. And that's an awful thing to hear. And it doesn't mean they want to die, not really. It means they want to see their person. But I think that can lead to a very confusing thing. And I've seen friends who've, had gifts from heaven. And I just think that's very confusing. For my personal opinion, you can choose to do what you will with that. But I think it's confusing for children. If you believe in heaven, I think there needs to be very clear distinction that people can't just decide to jot off there for the day, because children are so literal in their understanding of what that means. And they believe in all kinds of things, so they will listen to you as parents. And I just think we need to be so careful. And with my girls, I've just always said, you make your decision on what you believe. And Brooke once said to me, when my grandma died, she said, when I asked her what she believed, she said, I just think that when people die, the love that was in them just gets shared out amongst the people that are left behind. And that's it. And that's how they live on. Yeah. They live on in the love. And I was like, well, I'm down with that. That works for me. That's cool with me. And I believe, I know that energy is infinite. So that is science. And so Ross's energy is here somewhere in this ethos. And it might not be in the form that I wish it to be in, but he lives on in the memories. He lives on in the love. He lives on in the faces that Brooke and Texas pull at me. And in somewhere he's part of this space that we are in. And you know what, as people, what you believe in, why on earth we are all here, none of us really know. But I just think that you can just do the best that you can. And on Ross's funeral cards, we had a quote that Ross said to me when he went in for his second brain surgery. And he just said to me, look, if I die in this, just tell them I was all right. That's it. That's it. Just tell them I was all right. Yeah. That's it. And it doesn't have to be more profound than that. We just put too much on it.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. It's interesting you say that, like forcing any kind of faith onto anyone, no matter what you believe in. It's not for here or there. I went to a Roman Catholic secondary school, so it's an absolute head fuck, for to kind of have it scaremongered on you, and confessions and stuff like confessions, having to do that and all this. So it can leave you just like really in a shit space. It really it just has to be your own decision. It can't be pushed on by someone else. Like whatever you decide to do, just do it on your own terms and figure it out yourself. Just like do what works for you. But going back to the Happy Me project, for anyone that's sort of interested in working with you, sort of, what do you deal with, I guess, on the spectrum?
So in terms of what I do, I'm a life coach. So I'm not a counsellor. I don't deal with people's deep trauma. That's not really although people come to me who have deep trauma, what we do is we focus on the right now, where we're at this point, and what we can do moving forward. So I talk lots and lots about, all different kinds of mental health type stuff, but I am not trained to deal with, your deep mental health issues. That's not what I do. But what I do is for the majority of people that are feeling lost or unconfident or unsure and maybe a bit sad and stressed, that's the space that I work in. And we look at, and in initial sessions with me, if people are working with me one-on-one, we will look at why stuff happened. We will talk about all of that stuff, and we'll just get it out on the table. And then we'll go, so we know all the reasons why this happened. This is where we're at right now. So what can we do moving forward to work through some of this stuff? Because we can't change the fact that stuff happened. I can't change the fact that Ross died. Nothing I can do. I can bang my head against the wall. Nothing will change with that. But what I can control is what I do now. And so I work with people in that capacity. And so I have lots of spaces people can work with me, whether it's they come into my free Facebook community. I go live in there every Monday now, and that's a total open forum. We talk about all different, I usually pick a subject and then we talk about it, and we chat it out, and people come up with their own thoughts. And often people in that group will come to me and say, do you know what, I'm really struggling with saying no to people, was something I was talking about this morning. Saying no, I don't know how to say no. We're talking about that. People pleasing, I'm a people pleaser, and we'll talk about that and what you can do and some boundaries you can put in place, and we'll talk about whatever it is. And so there's that free space. Then I've got 2 courses that people can do that are what we would call evergreen courses, which just means they're there for you to go and grab. These are online. The Happy Me one, 21 days of audios, videos, and a workbook. Dead straightforward, bite-sized, chunkable stuff. You stick your headphones in, you listen to some concept, you write a little bit in a workbook, and each day for 21 days, you're learning something new. That was the original course. And then there's the Happy Me 2, which is all about self-belief and confidence. And that's a slightly bigger course. You can do that in your own time frame. But that course is based on what's going on the inside. Why don't you believe in yourself? And then also, how can you look confident on the outside? In which case I use my acting hat and teach you what actors know about the physicality of looking confident. Because there's no point doing all the work on the internal stuff and still walking around showing up in the world like you're unconfident, because the world will then still respond in exactly the same way to you and you won't get the response that you want. So that was the second course. I've also got some recorded meditations and things on there that people can grab. And then the next time, I've got a group coaching program which is called the You Got This Academy. That's 6 weeks of going from all the fear to getting clear. So going from all the confusion, I'm lost, I don't know what I want to do with my life, or whatever specific thing that you want to work on. And through the 6 weeks, we gain a bit of it. We create a roadmap of where you want to be. I'm actually in the first go of that right now, but I'm going to be opening the doors to new students in February. So that will be something that I run a couple of times in the year. But that's for people that can't quite afford to work with me one-on-one, but want a bit more of an intimate, working space. So we've got 30 people in that group now. So that would be max for me to be working with. And then if people want to, and they don't want to work in a group capacity, but they want to work with me one-on-one, they send me an email. I don't work with everybody. I only work with 5 people at a time, because I put a lot into my one-on-one clients, and we can work on anything. Generally, people come to me in 2 spaces. I often work with female entrepreneurs in a mentoring type capacity. So I work with a lot of female entrepreneurs, and they usually come to me with lots of confidence type issues as well. There's a lot of people pleasing, not having very fuzzy boundaries and all that kind of stuff. And then I have the other capacity, which is anybody really who comes to me, generally women, because I am one, but that's not to say that it's not a closed door policy. And usually people come to me for the same kinds of reasons, when they're just not feeling great, when they're not sure, where they're feeling a bit lost, where they're not sure where they want to go next, and they need somebody to hold them accountable and work through all of that with them. And so that's what we do. So there's lots of spaces that people can work with me, and I try to have it so that there's lots of ways, from free to more intense working with me, to give people lots of options to be able to do that. And also my YouTube channel as well, where there's years of me chatting about stuff on there that might be useful for people.
Yeah, that's great, because I think some people just struggle how to know what the next steps are when they're caught up in, when you're so caught up in your own shit. It's hard to know how to progress with that, and just to get rid of it. For guilt, for example, people really struggle. You can be like, it's parts of my life I think, oh, what the fuck was I doing when I was 19 years old? And I'm 31 now, and you still kind of go back and think that, what the fuck was I doing at that point? But it's okay to kind of have that accountability, account for yourself and say, yeah, I fucked up. But the guilt, guilt that you have, like holding on to that guilt, is just so unhealthy, and it's not letting that guilt go.
I'm reading at the moment the Brené Brown book, Daring Greatly. I don't know if you've read that. It's a really good book about, you'd enjoy that. I think it's all about shame and guilt and all of that stuff. And she talks both about male and female shame that we carry, whether it's, she talked, I think women are definitely much more open to self-development, and men are getting much more so now, but it's a new space for men to be talking about their feelings. And in this, she's asking men, she had asked men, and what shame looks like to them, and it was things like, shame is not being able to provide for your family, that's shame. And there's all these, it's just interesting to hear all of the common shames that we carry around, and that actually how similar we all are, and that we carry all of that stuff. And when it comes to things like the Happy Me project and the work that I do, I try to, the reason that I talk about my own experiences, because I don't want people to feel shame. I want people to know that even with all of the knowledge that I have, there'll still be some days that I sit in my pants watching Netflix and eating crisps and feeling sad and sorry for myself. It's not, we're too hard on ourselves as people. And I know that, like I said earlier, a lot of people come to me when they don't necessarily even know what they're looking for. They just don't feel great. And they maybe stumble on one of my Facebook or Instagram posts, and then they start following me. And, I try to be as relatable and human as possible and talk about real stuff, and not filter all my stuff and be all perfect and all that kind of stuff that you see people doing. Because I can't think of anything more dull and boring. But what will often happen is then people will jump into the Facebook group and they get to know my style of coaching in there, and probably they sit quite quietly for a bit and don't share, and then maybe they comment a few times and then they maybe go away. And actually, while we've been on this call, I've seen a few people just doing the Happy Me project. I can see people logging, like, have got it, and sometimes they'll do a little bit of that and they'll realize, you know what, this self-development stuff's actually quite good and I'm feeling quite good doing it. And often I'll have people that'll then come to me a year down the line of that process and they'll go, I've been watching your stuff for a while and I want to do some proper coaching with you. And that's where that kind of next step is. And quite honestly, I've never pushed anything very much when it comes to that, because I just always think that people will come to me and work with me when it's the right time for them and if I'm their vibe, because I don't want to work with people that don't get the way that I do stuff either. Like, that's not much fun for me. And back in the day, I used to let anyone come on in, no boundaries whatsoever over here. And then I'd end up working with people that just wanted to play victim and they didn't want to ever move from that space because they got too much secondary gain from being a victim. They got too much gain.
I was literally, as you were talking about, you know, sort of being in your pants watching Netflix eating crisps.
Yeah.
I was, we all do it. We all have those shit things where you feel sorry for yourself. I think the most destructive emotion anyone can have is self-pity, because it takes away everything, it pushes everything away, and it just leaves itself. Being self-pity is the way. No, it's not. You know, there's nothing wrong with having it. We all experience it, but it's acknowledging that when you're having
a limit.
Yeah, it has to have a limit. Yeah, I always say to people, don't not acknowledge emotions. Feel your pain, have your cries, sit in your pants and eat Netflix. It's not eat Netflix, eat crisps, don't eat Netflix. That's confusing. Do all of that stuff, but then there has to be an end goal. Like, ultimately for me, my driver is freedom and happiness. I just want to be happy and free, and I want to live whatever time I've got on this planet. I want to live it in a full way. And me sitting going, but my husband died. Well, that just stops me from, sad stuff happened to me. That just stops me in my tracks. I can't move from that space. And it's not to put judgment on people, because we are only ever dealing with things from our level of understanding in that time. We're all doing the best that we can. Even that dickhead that is on your Facebook that annoys you, she's or he is doing the best that he can. They're doing the best that they can based on what they've got. But as you learn more, as you get better, as you read more books, or you follow people online and you listen to podcasts like this, as you gain more insight into life, if you still sit there in your pants, then you're just taking up space. Like, it's just crazy that to me. Like, and don't get me wrong, please do not think I'm minimizing, I'm not talking about mental illness. I'm not talking about the deeper stuff that needs some more intervention. And there are absolutely, obviously, certain things that need, a doctor's intervention. I'm not even a person that doesn't agree. I don't not agree with antidepressants and things like that. There's a space for all of this stuff. It is not one size fits all. Some people will go and see a counselor and do CBT, and that will be the thing for them. Some people want to read some posts on Instagram and some nice quotes on their wall, and that does it for them. Some people want to go raving or running, and that works for them. For me personally, counselling does nothing. Just nothing. No, I agree. Yeah.
It does nothing for me, but that's because I talk a lot, as you can tell. So talking doesn't do anything for me, action does. And so I think everybody's different, but I certainly think for me now, I know that the good thing about the work that I do as a life coach, and why life coaching has always interested me more than counselling. And I could have went that route. And I did I did an initial course in counselling, and I just thought, I don't want to work with people in this capacity because this wouldn't be enjoyable for me. Like, I don't want to sit going over and over somebody's pain with them, because I personally think I'm not, and by the way, I'm not the oracle of everything. I'm not some kind of flipping guru here. This is my opinion, and this is what I see working with people that I work with. But I think stewing over your pain constantly, rerunning that, makes it perpetuate, and all you end up doing is attracting more of that, because you're literally taking your pain and you're hiding behind it and going, this is my excuse for a living. I can't do anything because of the pain here. It's my shield, it's my excuse, it's my reason. And again, I'm not judging you for that. I understand the motivation to do that. If I sat here and went, I can't do anything because my husband died, do you know what? Everyone would go, I can understand. I can understand, because people are good. People are generally good people. They would want to be nice, but that's not going to help me to live a happy life. That's not going to help my children have a happy life if I sit there holding up my trauma to the world and going, oh, I can't do anything because of this. And ultimately, it's about radical responsibility. At the end of the day, you have a choice. You can give up or you can get back up. After you cry, after you've sat in your pants watching Netflix, but you have to at some point decide to get back up.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really great to hear. And it's been great to talk to you today, Holly. I feel like we need to get you on I'm a Celebrity in the Jungle or something. I think you'd be great on it. Would you do it?
Oh my God. I would not want to jump out of a plane. I can't, that's the bit the rest of it, I think I'd get over. I mean, I'm not a big fan of the spiders and stuff.
Okay.
But I don't know, it'd be funny. I mean, I don't know. I've always said no to reality TV, and then I realised that my life is literally on a platform and it makes no difference. So maybe I would, who knows?
Yeah, no, I think...
I mean, let's be honest, they're going down the Z-list celebrity route now. I mean, give me a couple of years, I'm in that jungle. I don't know who's in it this year. Who's in it? Do you know?
To be fair, the lineup's not too bad, because I don't know if that's because it's in Wales and it's not the...
Oh, is that where it is?
Yeah, it's in a castle. Yeah. So they've got like
right.
Shane Ritchie and Mo Farah, who plays Liz on Corrie. I can't remember her name, Beverly something.
Okay.
It's quite a good little lineup. But there's a few people on there that I don't know, and I'm sure lots of people would recognise you.
Well, we'll see. Maybe in a couple of years, we'll see how this pandemic goes, shall we? And then they'll be like, can we just get somebody? Oh, that girl there, she used to be on Byker Grove. She used to be on the telly. Get her in.
Waterloo Road. Do it.
Waterloo Road. Get her in now. Give her a spider or something. Although you're not going to get all of that in Wales. I don't know what they're going to scare them with in Wales.
Sheep's testicles, I think, what it is. But I think we'll see lots of that. You don't want them dangling in the face, do you?
You don't, do you? But anyhow, well, I mean, what a way to end this podcast, really. Yeah. I mean, talking about sheep's testicles. I feel great about it.
I mean, yeah. So where can people follow you and everything in the Happy Me Project and, your social media stuff?
All of that. So you type in Holly Matthews into the internet, and if you can't find me, your internet is broken and you need to phone a person. So I hang out mostly on Instagram and Facebook. I act the Tom Fool on TikTok, and I'm on YouTube, but mostly Instagram and Facebook are kind of my spaces to hang out, and a little bit of Twitter, but I'm probably ranting about Russell Brand or something on there. I don't know what I'll be doing. But you can also go onto Facebook groups, and the Happy Me Project group is in there, and everyone is absolutely welcome. Anybody can come and hang out in there, as long as they're in a space of wanting to find solutions and not just be playing victim, because it's certainly not a community of woe is me. It is a community of let's find solutions, let's work through it. We can have a bit of can be a bit upset and stuff, but we can also go, okay, now what do we do? So they can hang out in my Facebook group, and all of my courses and stuff, there'll be links. If you type in the Happy Me Project and Holly Matthews online, you'll get links somewhere. Hopefully I've done my job well enough that will happen. And please feel free to email or message me as well, because I am accessible. I mean, I won't answer if it's like midnight and you're asking me some random question, which is what happens sometimes. But I am an accessible person. So do just message me. And if you have any questions, I will endeavour to point you in the right direction, no doubt.
Brilliant. Holly, amazing talking to you today. Should we finish with Away the Lads?
Away the lads!
Cheers, Holly.
That's the best. Thank you.